Burnout is an ongoing situation. So we often find that especially our top performers struggle with this.
Typically in many organizations, there's an approach of working hard, sometimes too hard. They work so hard, they can burn out. They will burn out, they shut off. They're not working.
How do you keep that engagement and motivation going when you're working from home and you're away from the office? Also for the young generation who we know they won't stay as long in the job as their parents did, for example.
Yeah.
Y bienvenidos nuevamente aquí a nuestro podcast. Gracias por estar con nosotros. Estamos muy contentos porque tenemos a dos académicos, investigadores que han publicado un sinnúmero de investigaciones y pruebas psicométricas. Tenemos al doctor Ruben Barón, que tomó un avión el día que se dispararon los eventos ahí en Israel. Bienvenido, Ruben. Welcome.
Thank you.
Y tenemos a la doctora Karina, I hope I get this right, Fidel Dave.
Van Dijk, yes.
Van Dijk.
Very good.
Like the painter?
Yes.
Okay. Y la doctora Karina. Bueno, les cuento rápido. Miren, mucho de lo que hemos hablado en el podcast ha sido alrededor de ese vacío que hay en la dimensión humana en las empresas. Los doctores han publicado una serie de papers en diferentes journals y también han hecho varias pruebas psicométricas. El doctor Ruben Barón fue un pionero que incluso antes de que saliera la famosa inteligencia emocional, él andaba haciendo ya publicaciones sobre lo que llamó un coeficiente emocional. Ha sido citado en múltiples trabajos académicos y aparte es editor en una revista de psicología académica que se llama Frontiers in Psychology en el área de organización. Es un comisionado honorario en los Estados Unidos en diferentes organizaciones. También trabaja en Israel en un instituto para la regulación de emergencia y desastres y ha publicado otras 10 pruebas psicométricas que se usan desde 1978. Tiene una contribución al ramo de la psicología y organización que lo pueden buscar en Wikipedia. Vamos a poner aquí el nombre del doctor Ruben Barón para que lo puedan buscar en Wikipedia. Y nació en Estados Unidos y actualmente reside en Israel. Tomó un vuelo justo un día antes de que empezaran los disturbios en Israel. La doctora Karina Fidel Dave Van Dijk, ella es experta en la parte de cómo hacer pruebas psicométricas, consulta para empresas en diferentes partes del mundo, de cómo atraer talento, mantener talento, retener talento dentro de las empresas. Ha hecho diferentes aportaciones en el área de inteligencia emocional, liderazgo, clima organizacional y demás. Tienen un método que ahorita lo vamos a platicar sobre cómo medir el performance, que le vamos a llamar el desempeño. Y bueno, ambos naturalmente son académicos distinguidos, vienen con una robustez académica impresionante, vienen a dar una conferencia aquí a la EGADE en Monterrey y tuve pues el privilegio y la suerte de tenerlos aquí con nosotros. Quédense, vamos a hablar de performance, de desarrollo. Es un enfoque muy interesante, global, y bienvenidos. So, I would like to ask you about your model, the Barón multi-factor measure of performance. Really, in my knowledge, this is actually the first model that I hear that focuses on performance, and that after reading this paper, I found it very involving or very holistic in its approach. I would like to start with your description of how would you describe your model. What does it measure? What does it solve?
Okay. First of all, there are two things that are connected. One is the theory behind it, the theory, the conceptual model, and then there's the test, the assessment, and the assessment is built on it. And both of them it's like symbiotic. They developed about at the same time. So the more we use the assessment, and we get the receive results, it shines a light on the theory itself. So it's like focusing. We're getting more. We think we're getting more into focus of what it is. The idea is that human performance. Karina, come in and share your ideas with this as well, because we've been doing it for a long time together. The idea is that human beings perform based on a number of contributors to performance. And the frustration was, as psychologists, when they're trying to, or have been trying to understand human forms, they've looked just on one part: cognitive, physical, personality, emotional intelligence. And all these are parts of the human being. So our idea in this theory is that human beings are complex.
Absolutely.
They're composed of many different moving parts. And just to focus on one part is missing the picture. And the picture is, you look at the human being. This is the way we see it. The human being is made of body, and then there's brain, sometimes with some human beings.
Some more than others.
Yes. So there's body, there's brain, and there's the person, oneself, internal. We talked about this earlier. And then all of a sudden, this is almost like in developmental psychology. Baby is born, there's something physical. Eventually they look at themselves, then they find out there's another human being around them. Typically it's a mother, and then a family, and is extended, so it becomes personal, interpersonal. And then there's other things. There are what we call inspirational factors, and many people leave this out when they're talking about human performance. So, okay, we talked about earlier in the car about some people are interested, let's say, in buying a beautiful car with the greatest motor ever. So they have that. But if it doesn't have petrol, it doesn't have fuel, it doesn't go 1 inch. So the people have to be motivated. So we talk about, it's not talked about by other people in performance. So here's the entire human being, but the theory is called the whole person. And the person, in the end, has to be motivated to do it. They have to be engaged. They have to understand. And then that projects their performance even more. So that essentially we're looking at in this theory and also this test and theory. It is not just to be strong in one particular area, cognitive or physical or whatever. It has to be, we look at 18 factors. And these factors this should be a balance between strength and balance between different factors. And that's the way we see the human being performing and acting. Karina, what?
I think what I can add to this is that this is not a one-time process. So yes, we start with this process as infants or babies even, but we are, as human beings, we are in perpetual development. So it circles like a spiral back and forth the whole time, depending on what is needed, where we are focused on in our performance. So we never finished with it. But that's also the beauty of it, because it's a very forgiving model. where yes, you can make mistakes or you can fall behind or you can have struggles, but there's always that extra opportunity to circle back, revisit it, improve yourself as you are ready. And that part really excites me because it means that it's a very optimistic model. There's always opportunity for people to improve themselves as they are ready for it.
Well, I think it's very innovative. You started a long time ago. Is it hard for companies, for managers, for corporations to understand this integral, holistic approach?
We're trying very hard, and I think slowly, I think it will sink in. And the idea is, if you look at just narrowly from not just an individual, you narrowly as an organization, you're a CEO and owner of a company. The idea is, and we have evidence, we have research findings that back this up. The higher you perform, and it starts at individual, and the individual often works in an organization, in a team, and that team is part of an organization. So the people that are hired and developed that function or perform on a higher level, this, if you're looking at it from a narrow point of view for an organization, productivity and end product of many organizations is based on performance. And the performance starts at the individual level in an organization. It goes to a group of people, a team, if you wish, and it radiates out to the organization itself. So there's no, if you're looking at it, there's no profitability of an organization unless you recruit, hire, train, and try to retain people. And then they work on a higher level. And the goal of that particular organization, whatever it might be, productivity increases, and then profitability increases. That's on an organizational level. You can also look at it at the individual level as well.
Yeah, it's like an inside-out process.
Yes.
Yeah. I think based on my experiences working with individuals, both in a work context and outside of it, is that most people find the model to be very intuitive. It just makes logical sense to people. So I don't think the model itself is rocket science. Yes, there is a lot of refinement around the model since the early days of developmental psychology. But the rocket science is really, to what extent can people embrace it? So that's the difficult part to do, or the beautiful challenge of it. And that is where we need to focus.
Yeah. It seems that one of the key variables in order for adoption seems to be precisely the way to measure it. And that's where it gets a little more complicated. You guys developed a methodology. I've read what you did. It's amazing. It is very robust. You did tons of research. You interview people from all over the world. And can you say that if your model is well applied, is it easy to measure results?
I think so. When I look at it, I try to focus in and focus out, and I think it's really simple. It's really simple because you look at these. We found these particular factors and the way they combine, the balance between them, the strength. This the end product is performing better. The end product is feeling good about what you're doing, and then that goes back to performing at a higher level. So they're connected. It's easy to understand. It's easy to assess. Well, easy is after a lot of work to develop it, but we make it in a way that in this particular assessment, there's 120 questions and items, and the person responds to them. And we try to make it as simple as possible. So we looked at, in the beginning, readability. Can a a 12-year-old child, 11-year-old child understand this. So there's ways of looking at readability. And then we at the beginning, we had a number of ideas. We had more factors than 18. Then we applied statistics, and I don't want to get into this. I can if you wish. You think your audience is ready, but we use very sophisticated statistics to collect the strongest, psychometrically strongest items, and also the strongest scales that assess them. And then when it's applied, it's like reading a map. I look at it. The results we get, it's like a map. And I would say, hopefully, a map and a compass, because it's not just an assessment instrument. So you don't say, okay, these are my scores, I'm going to hang it on the wall, like a diploma. No, there's no use in that. So it's got to be, human beings like to use things. So I call it an assessment development instrument. So it gives you like a map of what's going on right now, what is enhancing performance, and what might be strengthened. This is the development part, to perform on a higher level if you so wish. So it's like a map, and I would say a compass, because it shows you where you're at and where you might want to go. So the compass says, you know what, to increase your performance, why don't you tighten up this particular area? And what about the balance? So, Corrine, we've been working such a long time. I know what you're thinking, so I know what's coming next.
You want to share with us?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. I think test development is both a science and an art.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
as developers, we have a huge responsibility to make sure we have the science well done, so that the assessment is as accurate as possible. But there's also the other side, the practitioner side. So we really took great care that it takes on average about 20 minutes to complete. It's very easy to complete. You can complete it from any type of electronic device, whether it's a desktop or a laptop or a tablet or your cell phone even. You can access your results 24/7.
Wow.
So there are all these practical things that we thought about in terms of how easy will it be to use it, to apply it. And also, this is no judgment. So we see doing or completing an assessment as a golden opportunity to have an honest conversation with yourself. So it's your opportunity to have a little bit of me time and say, okay, let's sit down for 20 minutes and honestly answer to these items that we have and get this feedback back to ourselves. And sometimes we have blind spots. Sometimes we don't know ourselves, or there are some surprises.
Or
we think we know
oftentimes.
ourselves.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then the assessment can really help you point some ways for how to think in new ways about yourself. And that opens up opportunities for personal growth.
My book that I published, it will be published in English, by the way. I'll be happy to send it to you guys.
Thank you.
But the core is self-knowledge or self-examination or consciousness, because we live so much in automatic pilot. We are on reactive mode mostly instead of creative mode. At the end of our conversation, I would like to share with the audience where can we access that type of test. I wanted to ask you something about the motivation that a company might have to include your model. You are a psychologist, you have positive reinforcement. In other words, the spirit of improving our performance as a company, beginning with the individual. That's a positive. But there is also a negative one. And this goes, my next question, I think of all the VPs of human resources or human capital or whatever they call themselves. They have a lot of trouble keeping people engaged in their company, keep people not being in apathy. Bosses oftentimes can be assholes. Bosses oftentimes can be psychotic, narcissists. They can use, exploit. And I've been reading a lot about employee satisfaction, and it seems to be going down every year. It seems like the model might perhaps be bankrupt, or something is going on because the statistics is there. So my question is, not only can this model help improve productivity and performance, but can it help solve the deep pain in being involved in these type of corporations in which you have to be there because you make a salary?
Okay. This is my thinking on this. You used the words looking inward, self-understanding. One of the scales in this assessment that examines a very important factor, and I call it's almost like a key. And the name of this scale that assesses this factor is called self-understanding. It's the ability to look inward. And without this ability, when it's not that well developed, if I don't look inward at myself and what I want in life, but it's difficult for me to look at other people. So it's like I have to have this key to understand myself better, to look inward in order to understand other people and work with them and connect and relate with them and whatever. So I think this is one of the most important things. And I think this is also, I think, one of the most important factors of the entire 18. Once again, it's not just one factor. These 18 factors that work together, that are combined, but really important is looking inward.
Mm-hmm. One of the 5 factor categories we call the inspirational factor categories, and 2 of the 4 scales that are measured there are engagement and motivation. So it doesn't matter where you apply it, whether in work or outside of work context, you will get feedback on those. So I think that's very important that you ask, especially also in the light of the new way of work, where after COVID, so many more people have more flexible working arrangements. Yeah. So how do you keep that engagement and motivation going when you're working from home and you're away from the office? Also for the young generation who we know they won't stay as long in the job as their parents did, for example. Yeah. So how do you keep that engagement if you change jobs or employers more frequently? So those are additional factors that might impact on engagement. Having said that, though, sometimes it's engagement for some individuals that's a real challenge. Other times it could be relationships, connectedness, and that then carries over to one of the other factor categories. Or it could be something like, I struggle with problem solving, with being strategic or being innovative because I need that additional external stimulus in order to really excel at that. And when we are working remotely, for example, is it more possible or is it less possible? And again, that depends on the individual, which is why it's so important to measure the whole person so that you can really get into the story behind each individual. So you have to look at all 18 factors, capture that story, understand what is really important to that individual, and then work with those facts, with the metrics, with the quantification of that.
And in fact, use of the word story, when we're looking at one's assessment, and we constantly say, what's the story behind it? What's the human being behind it? What are all these little numbers telling us? So that's getting it to the story, the human narrative.
Because it seems like we persons have our own self-story, conscious or unconscious. But if you have a story, you have a procedure, you have an end. Okay, I'm reading here part of your paper, and the interesting part to me, to our audience, and I'm going to send this to my friends in human resources, which they have a headache as to how to solve the dilemma of insatisfaction and apathy. But you talk about inspirational, social, physical, cognitive, and personal. So all these sort of like go down into 5 core
categories. Yeah,
categories: leadership, industriousness, productiveness, burnout. I found that very intriguing, and coachability.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about this?
Could I just correct something?
Please, correct.
So the leadership up till coachability, those are called ring factors.
Ring factors.
And those are additional factors to the Baron model, which focuses on the core factors. So we have 18 factors that are grouped into the 5 factor categories of the social, personal, physical, etc.
Okay, perfect. Any particular comment with respect to burnout or productiveness, any particular angle that you would like to illuminate?
I think a good one would be burnout. That's one of the ring factors of burnout avoidance. And why is it important? People work and they're involved in what they do. And typically in many organizations, there's a approach of working hard, sometimes too hard. And so the problem can be on a very personal level, but it impacts the organization as a whole. They worked so hard, they can burn out. And they will burn out, they shut off. They're not working. So and they're often there's a feeling of being depressed, and something's not going right. And sometimes they just leave. And this has an impact not only on the personal level, but on impacts other people with whom they work and the organization as a whole. So one indication, the U.S. Surgeon General, the head physician in the United States, for the last 4 years, they ask him, what is the most important medical, physical problem? Burnout. And so it involves human beings, a lot of suffering for organizations. It has a monetary implication of it. So we've looked at this, and I think, Corina, if you can say those particular core factors that impact this would really illuminate what we're looking at.
I just want to clarify, though, that we measure burnout avoidance. So this is not a diagnostic tool to determine if a person has burnout or not. So it's not a clinical tool. But what we do is we say, in your performance, what strategies do you have in place in order to not get to the point of burnout? So how can you avoid it, especially when times are tough, when the job is a little bit harder than usual, etc. So the 3 factors that contribute the strongest to burnout are ingenuity, and then coping, and self-control. So ingenuity and coping are, ingenuity is from the cognitive factor category, whereas coping and self-control are from the personal factor category. So the interesting thing about burnout avoidance is that one should not compare this or think that it's the same as, I've had a stressful day, or today was particularly tough. Burnout is an ongoing situation. So we often find that especially our top performers struggle with this, because they are the person who are always on, always the strong ones, always the responsible ones, the ones who would take on more responsibility, who help others out. So they cope. They keep things within themselves. They control. They're very innovative. They adapt to the situation the whole time. They are the people who are the most resourceful on the job. So it's high stress all the time for the longest time, and they keep at it until one day it's just too much. So what do we do in order to avoid getting to that point? And that's where the MMP can be of great help.
Yeah, is it related, of course, to depression, the burnout?
Yes, also, or withdrawal, which is also a sign of depression.
Ingenuity, the way you define it, comes from being naive or from being inventive?
I'm really glad you asked that question because it's a translation challenge as well. So
English
ingenuity has to do with more creativity. So it really has two parts. The one is to be resourceful.
Okay,
in other words, yes. And
Flexible,
the other part is
resourceful.
to be flexible, adaptable, being able to think on your feet.
If one approach A doesn't work, okay, what about approach B or C? So it's the flexibility to change gears to different approach. What works, fine. Yeah.
It seems like the way the system is built, we are an input of a mega system called capitalism. Do you think there is a lack of education of not only how to produce, but to how to live, what to value, what is the basic psychology of a human being? Do you think there's a lack in the education system on a systemic basis that needs to be addressed?
I definitely think so, because in today's world, we are so focused on business growth, client satisfaction, excel in the workplace, meeting our goals even faster than before. So there's a lot of outward pressure. And in the process, the employee is a little bit forgotten. And yes, we do say that organizations realize that employees are their greatest asset, but they don't make time to actually execute on that until there's a problem. And
what is
then,
a problem? I'm sorry?
until there is a
Until
problem,
there's a problem.
until
Yeah.
people
Boom.
leave
Yeah,
the
that's right.
job because they're unhappy, or until mental health
Or
increases.
silent quitting, that is called now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So our message is, why wait until there's a problem? Because when the problem is there, it's a
Might be too
lot
late.
more costly for
everyone.
businesses to correct that.
For the individual as well.
So
you know.
being more preventative, keeping checks on your employee in terms of their performance, tracking them over time, supporting them as needed when the problem is still a little bit small. You make a lot of gains, you save a lot of money in the process, which is the goal of the organization.
Mostly. You know.
So human resources, the department, needs to include this type of angle within their function.
I agree with you. I think that the whole human resources, they're at it's like the front door of a building, and the building is an organization. The people will come in. So the idea of by using this particular assessment is that you give them a way of assessing, bringing people in that might be high performers, and then bringing them into the organization, and then training and developing, and then retaining the people who are the best performers and work well with other people. So I would say it's very important for HR, because HR are really sitting at a critical point in the organization, so that this would help them do their work, I think, much better, more in a scientific, efficient manner.
I think so. They all, from my knowledge, being a consultant, they are all looking for answers as to how to do their job better. instead of, oh, here comes HR, what do they want now?
Yeah.
This is more proactive, more. Is it very related, your method, with mental health? Is mental health an issue?
Okay, I know what you're thinking, Karina. I know what you're going to say. Right? Well, maybe we might say it.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So from the very beginning, my background has been in clinical psychology for many years. And at one particular point, I said, this is my work. This is what I do. I do assessments and I try to do therapy and help people understand themselves and feel better and so forth and so on. So I was looking from the glasses of a clinician. So my idea is, but what about all the other people in the world who are not coming in for a mental problem, a psychological? What about just general human beings? So the idea was to go from psychopathology and psychotherapy to go into what some people call positive psychology. Just look at a continuum. And so from the beginning, we're not avoiding the use of the MMP as an assessment of mental problems, psychological problems. We're looking at positive human performance. But having said that, I think eventually that it could be used in a clinical setting. I would like to see with the way it impacts mental problems.
Yeah.
But
I look at mental health also a little bit more broadly than just in a clinical setting. Mm-hmm. And I think there are many warning signs in an organization before you get to the point of breakdown, for example, which is part of mental health. Examples of that would be individuals who start taking more sick leave days than usual. Flying under the radar, not taking more than what they can, but every Friday or every Monday, just to extend that weekend a little bit to catch their breath or to cope with a situation. When that happens, it's a warning sign. You mentioned silent quitting. When people do that, when you see that they just, run with, but they're not really coming forward. The passion is not there anymore. Then you know that this is a warning sign. So we need to learn to better pick up on those warning signs. And by measuring, by assessing individuals, you can get those warning signs perhaps a little bit more easily than trying to figure it out by yourself. Also, just to your previous point, if I may, about HR, we need to be careful not to think that, this is a problem for HR. It's their problem and it's theirs to solve. I think all of us have a responsibility. Every manager who has a direct report has a responsibility. Every CEO has a responsibility, not just HR.
I see.
And with shared responsibilities, the problem becomes a little bit lighter because there are more eyes on what could be happening. We have more time to prepare for it so that we can be more preventative rather than reactive.
Excellent. Yes, this is hard to imagine being allocated to only one area within the company, because it's about people at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. Do you experience any differences in management than subordinates? In other words, me personally, I deal a lot with VPs and CEOs and owners, and sometimes they seem to be to have the biggest blind spots, or they think that the problem is the other people instead of themselves. Any comment on that?
I would say that the idea that the higher your position is in the organization, the higher your performance is, that's a myth. At every level, we have both high performers and then average performers and marginal performers. It is about what factors come into play and are becoming more critical in each role. So definitely when we look at different managerial levels, for example, we have differences in the profile, and we are able to tell at each level which is the top factor, for example, that is the highest contributor to performance at that level. So you can make some predictions, you can employ or develop or recruit based on those factors, but there's opportunity for everyone at every level.
Yeah. And for example, at the very top, the main factor is...
So if you say at the very top, we're thinking about CEOs or anyone in the C-suite, and that would be engagement.
Really?
So back to what you spoke about.
And this was an eye-opener for us.
Yeah.
Engagement.
Yes.
How engaged are you in your work? And
wow.
And then this is magnified to around the people you work with.
It radiates.
Oh, yeah.
But if you think about it, it makes a huge lot of sense, because at the very top, you tend to become a little bit less directly involved with the people on the floor.
Yeah.
You're sitting in your corner office with a nice view, and you focus more on strategy and where the business is going. You're less focused on individuals, and yet those CEOs who are highly engaged, they are the people who sometimes walk on the floor and chat with the people and get feedback from them and hear how it's going, and add some words of encouragement or motivation or share some of that strategy. So those are your best CEOs that keep those people engaged. So to me, it's not really a surprise.
It makes sense.
It makes sense, although I personally thought it would be something more being tough or and that is fascinating, you're finding. Now, for example, I'm in strategy, and we say that the biggest seller of strategy, the biggest salesman of strategy is the CEO. And the CEO has to continuously, passionately, in an engaged mode, sell, push, remind, and continuously repeat the strategy with, of course, that spirit, I would say. It seems to be that soft skills are more important than hard skills. It seems to be that all the hard skills that we learn as MBAs, we're missing the big chunk in soft skills.
Yeah. Well, they do say soft skills are the hardest skills to develop or to acquire, but it's a mix. I think we shouldn't underestimate the value of hard skills, but soft skills is just helping individuals to round themselves out, to strike that balance between being both strong in their soft skills, but also still have a healthy life and being able to sustain their well-being in order to keep performing really well.
It seems that artificial intelligence is going to take up a lot of tasks that perhaps today we think of them as being hard skills. But I have an idea that in the long run, it would be the soft skills, enthusiasm, engagement, creativity, all our original human skills that will really make the difference in companies.
I think so too. Yes, I think so too. I think this is, but the question is, how many people out there understand that?
Yeah.
And how long will it take before this sinks in and then is applied? That's one of the questions.
It's a toughie. With respect to the younger generations, I have 3 millennials. The oldest studied cinema and script writing, scriptwriter, copywriter, and he once told me, "Father, the way you work, I don't like it. I don't want to be like you. I think it's ridiculous what you've been doing." the thought I had with my father as well. Younger generations, the crystal generation, they don't take a lot of hard work. Does this assessment address those needs? Or in other words, are they, through your assessment, telling us something about the future?
This is interesting. I think that the information we're collecting on samples, on various benchmarks for different age groups, we're beginning to receive more information on this. And as you say, Father, we don't like this approach, and our approach is different. So it's almost like a different group of people when you look at it. And
we found in our research that there are definitely significant differences. And that's why we can offer benchmarks. So what is a benchmark? It means that you can compare yourself against your own generation or against your own gender or against your own managerial group or country or any type of demographic. In terms of the younger generation, just to give you an example, what they really value in terms of the 18 core factors are wellness and motivation. So those are strengths for them. Areas where they struggle are problem solving and ingenuity.
Ingenuity as in creativity.
Creativity, yes. Being resourceful, adaptable.
Flexible, changing.
I want to say that with some qualification though. When people are younger in general, yes, the problem solving and ingenuity are a little bit slower to develop. That comes with age, with maturity, with experience. So it could be a combination a little bit of that and what the younger generation value at this point as well.
Any differences between countries? For example, your studies in Mexico would say something different, I assume, than the Netherlands or Europe?
Yeah. Yes. We've looked at North America, for example,
including Mexico or no?
Not including.
No.
So US and Canada.
We're developing it now. We're going that direction. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Against other countries combined, just because we didn't have enough data yet to compare exactly country by country. Generally speaking, in terms of the model and what is average and what is high or low is the same across countries because we standardize our scales. So that means that you can compare no matter what country you are from. I would say, though, that sometimes in some countries who are more overt, more openly expressing themselves in a very strong way, they might use more of the extreme scales on the response scale that we use to respond to the items in the assessment, and others might be more towards the middle. So, for example, European countries, a little bit more towards the middle, US-based individuals a little bit more to the extremes because it's a cultural style. But we do address for those different response styles in the scoring so that ultimately when you compare, we still compare apples with apples.
But it's very important for us to collect as much information around the world as possible. And that, I think, now it looks like we're beginning to receive more people from Mexico who are completing this. So we're thinking about, hopefully, it goes in the direction of hundreds, perhaps thousands. So in our particular work, if we have 2.5 people, that's not going to work. To make some sort of conclusion, we need a large amount of people. So it's going to go in that direction. It's going to go in the direction of collecting what we call norms on other nationalities and groups and compare between the two. This is going to be interesting.
And this is very much a collaborative approach with our Mexican-Spanish colleagues, for which we are very grateful.
Perfect. 2 more questions, if you don't mind. I know you guys are ready to go and give a conference. How would you, in your model, define performance? For example, now that we were talking about countries, I thought if you want cars, you get German cars or Japanese cars. I worked in Germany when I was younger. You think of machines, they're productive, they're good performers. And then you think of other countries, well, perhaps they have good food or nice beaches, not necessarily associated with performance per se. So I would like to understand your concept of performance and the connection with productivity or the distinction with productivity.
Well, productivity or productiveness is one of the factors we look at. How productive are people? And I would imagine it's logical to assume when we receive more data that we're going to find difference in productiveness. Some people, some countries are going to possibly on this look or appear to be more productive than others. And so once again, this particular puzzle is solved by receiving and analyzing more and more data. Yeah. So.
Okay. Perfect. You wanted to add something, or?
Well, performance we define as action for a specific purpose to achieve some kind of desired outcome or goal. So it's just not just action for the sake of action, but really with some reason behind it.
And with a specific goal.
Yeah. Yes. And because so many organizations tie productivity to goals, it means that, yes, they are busy with performance, and performance is really omnipresent. So in other words, not just at work, but in your personal and social life as well. And that's why we have the MMP with its factors to then break it down in certain parts to see what is each person's particular combination of contributors to performance, because that can differ.
Strength and balances is a combination.
Fascinating. Have you guys published the book?
We're going in that direction.
Okay. Whenever you do, please let us know.
Will do.
So we can attach it to...
Yeah, I will add perhaps that apart from a scientific article that you've referenced a short while ago, we also have an article published more for the business audience, so in Scientia Global. And you can just go to that website, and in the search button or the search box at the top, you can just type in MMP, and you will be able to find that 2-page easy read article.
Okay. Yeah.
And there's also a website just for everyone to learn a little bit more about the model and the MMP, which is called MMP and then the number 2 perform.com. And of course, we have our local colleagues as well who will have information in Spanish about the MM.
My last question would be, before I want to leave the contact for your Mexican partners. It's important for people who want to follow up.
Yep.
Perfect.
I'm sure you also have partners maybe in other parts of the world.
That's right.
The website will probably refer them as well. You mentioned, I think that when I read your paper, I was thinking more of an organization or corporation and the use of helping people feel better inside so they can project a better performance outside.
Yeah.
And I like the way you mentioned it before we started. You start with the individual, then you start with groups, then you start with teams, then you go through the whole corporation. But does this MMP have also an individual use? In other words, this is not only geared towards companies. Can any person access your test for self-diagnosis? How would that work?
Yeah. So certainly through the local partners that we have, they can reach out to them and they will set them up to complete the assessment. Perhaps for starters, they can begin with just learning what are their top 4 factors.
Strongest.
So you can appreciate more what are your strengths. And then if you want to learn even more about it, your full profile, there are many options depending on why are you interested, what's going on in your life right now, and then the partners will select for you an appropriate report and take it from there.
And
so
a complete debriefing on the results. Yeah.
It seems like there's two lines of business or two different products. The individuals who have this interest and the company use.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
It goes individual, organizational.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Before we go, if you don't mind, and I would also like to leave the local contact here in Mexico, I was intrigued by your paper. You did tons of research, interviewed tons of people throughout the world. Any surprise that you came up with?
Yes, you may see also in the factors itself that some of these factors tend to combine intuitively together. So, for example, we have self-understanding, and then we also have social awareness. And some people assume that if you have high self-understanding, that you will also have high social awareness, or if you are low in the one in terms of your scores and how you view yourself, you are low in the other one as well. And that is not the case. Some people have high self-understanding, so they do a lot of introspection, reflection on themselves. They understand what is the impact of things happening in their life on themselves, but they may not have high social awareness. Wow. So they're not looking outward itself. So it's like being in tune with yourself and being in tune with others. So there can be a disconnect, or other people are so in tune with others and constantly focused on how other people are doing, but not honoring themselves in the same way.
And another one that comes to mind is the correlation between self-understanding and what we call coachability, the ability to understand oneself and to develop further. So it makes sense. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a big surprise. I mean, we knew that there must be a connection. Then we see the results that yes, people that typically understand themselves better, they are open to learning, continue to learning themselves and develop themselves. Yes.
Wow, fascinating. The complexity of human nature.
Yes.
We can reach the moon, we can reach Mars, but we still don't understand the complexity, the beauty of the mind. So 20 minutes is all that it takes for me to feel that assessment. How many questions does it include?
120 questions.
Wow.
120 questions.
Yeah. Yes. And I must say, we didn't start out with 120 questions. So what we are looking at today is the fourth version. So there were 3 experimental versions that Reuven worked on before over several years. So it's a matter of trying questions out, assessing them statistically to see what are their psychometric properties, and then starting to refine them, making them more pure to the concept.
Yeah. Wow.
Because each question is tied to a specific factor. So it has to be purely based on that factor or a particular part of it. And that is why we can get away with only 120 items, because we know exactly how they fit in.
And yes. There's another problem too, is that if we've looked at many different tests, many different psychological tests, and typically if you have many items, there's some 480 and 200 and something. People get tired. And then their tiredness impacts the way they respond. I want to get finished with this. I want to go. This is too much. And so that's so you have to have that balance.
Yeah. So on the one hand, it was that whole process of development. The second part of that is just that we have a very sophisticated scoring algorithm that also takes care of biases, because when people rate themselves, they tend to score themselves a little bit higher because they want to appear to be high in their performance. So all those systemic biases that can be built into a self-report, we decided to build that into the scoring to neutralize that. Wow. in order to make the resulting profile as accurate as possible.
In psychological street talk, they talk about faking good and faking bad.
Yeah.
And there's a human tendency to say it.
Of course.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to fill that 120 questions. I remember when I was being hired for a executive position in a company, they took me to an assessment center.
Mm-hmm.
The assessment lasted 8 hours.
Oh my God. Yeah.
In fact, I had to go out and had lunch.
Yeah, sure.
Came back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I said, what did I do in 8 hours? I didn't even remember. I was so overwhelmed.
I know.
Yeah.
And they would have saved a lot of stuff. Well, thanks again.
Pleasure.
Interesting. I would like to give the audience the reference as to what to do if they want to find out more about what you do, the assessment, the research, or they want to try it for themselves, or they want to explore to do it within their company. I have here, lo voy a decir en español, los señores están representados por dos caballeros aquí en México. Gabriel Garza, ahí viene su correo, gabriel.garza.clip@gmail.com. También podemos dar tu teléfono. La compañía que lo representa se llama CIP, Centro Integrador de Ideas y Proyectos, al igual que Whitewater, The Teaming Company de José de San Cristóbal, sancristobal@whitewater.mx. También viene el teléfono. Ya nos hicieron, Karina, el favor de mencionar el website, mmp2perform.com. Y bueno, nuevamente le agradecemos muchísimo a Rubén y a Karina. Thank you so much for being here. It's an honor to have you. I hope you have a lot of success in Mexico. I hope that you have a lot of success in implanting this vector in companies. And I hope you help the people of the world move towards being a better human being, because that seems to be the beginning of everything. Any final comment you might want to share?
This was an enjoyable interview, but the problem is that it's short. We could have gone for. It's not a problem, but it's the reality of it. We could have gone on for a long time.
For a long time.
And to go into depth more. Yes.
Thank you. Maybe next time with some tequila here.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would work.
Thank you very much, Ruben.
Yeah.
Anything
you.
You want to add?
Yeah, I just want to say that I think that's our personal performance goal, and that is to help other people.
Yeah,
so if the
that's it.
MMP
That's it.
can assist with that, we will be very, very pleased with that.
Perfecto. Thank you. Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Bienvenidos a México. Gracias.